We're on page 405. Top of the page. Aval b'virkat hamotzi, with the blessing of hamotzi, shel seudot Shabbat, of the Shabbat meals, u'seudot Yom Tov, and the Yom Tov meals. Af al pi shechayav min hadin lechol seudah shel pat, even though according to halakha you must eat a meal of bread. מכל מקום, אינו מוציא את אחרים מידי חובה כל שאינו אוכל בעצמו. You don't fulfill the mitzvah for somebody else if you didn't eat the bread. So unlike other mitzvot, we said that you can do the bracha and you don't have to eat from the food, or enjoy from the wine, so you can make kiddush for somebody but you don't have to drink the wine. By hamotzi, hamotzi is like regular eating, and therefore, by hamotzi, you have to eat from the bread if you want to say the bracha for somebody else. If you wanted to complicate it, we could, but we're not going to. 406. Yes.
Ma'avdel. Yesterday we said for Sukkah, you can say the mostly for somebody else, and here
Let's answer.
Well, maybe over here it's the food itself, and in the sukkah it was the mitzvah of dwelling in the sukkah, not the food.
that would be the Sheva Sukkah, yeah.
Some sukkahs are just too small.
Based on
You have to eat outside.
Because either way, it's a Suda that's a mitzvah for you.
I don't have a good answer for you, and I don't want to say something that's not true. Most of the poskim are asking differently, which is not what's the difference between Sukkot bread and Shabbat bread, but what's the difference between Shabbat Kiddush and Shabbat Hamotzi? I mean, those are very comparable, and you can say Kiddush without drinking from the wine, but not Hamotzi.
Yeah.
Both of them are a mitzvah. There's a few different answers to answer that contradiction in Maran. What seems to be a contradiction in Maran. But I'm inclined, like the other poskim, to just leave it like they said. So it requires more research.
I thought you said one was rabbinical, one was from the Torah.
That's with Friday night and Shabbat day. Someone to say that because you eat bread at every meal, so eating bread is just... because wine is also different, but because people don't drink wine at every meal. You make wine at Kiddush, and it looks important, so then the wine, it's obvious that you're doing it not as a hana'ah, not for benefit, but you're doing it for a mitzvah. But the bread, you eat bread every meal of yours. So now you're eating bread. It doesn't look like it's for a mitzvah any more than any other bread. I don't know if that answer is very strong, but it's an answer that was given. What are we looking to? Yeah, I'm gonna look into it. 406. V'im eno mekadesh al hayayin el al hapat. And if you don't make kiddush on wine, only on bread, when would you make kiddush on bread?
We don't have wine.
When you don't have wine, you make kiddush on bread. Where?
Shabbat lunch.
Anytime that you need to see Kiddush.
You're a Nazir or something?
Yeah, that can happen too, by the way. Yes.
It works.
The wife is right. You could look at the footnote on 404, Nun Aleph, if you want to go through that. He's going to refer you elsewhere. It's similar to what I just told you. He's basically quoting that same answer I just told you, but trying to take it to a different place. If you have the books Chazon Obadiah at home, he's referring to his father's writings over there. And if I get a chance, I'll look at it at home. So when would you make Kiddush on bread? When you don't have wine. Or I once was a person who considered himself a Nazir. Don't worry, he was as crazy as he was a Nazir. And he also made Kiddush on bread. The only Siddur that I've seen in my life that has, like a modern Siddur, that has Kiddush, and in there has, how do you make Kiddush on bread?
You say the Shamru and then you say Motzi.
Yeah, you hold it, Yom HaShishi V'Echol Ma'atzot Zara, and then instead of Borei Puri Hagev, you say, Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, and then you say the second bracha. Baruch Hashem Mekadesh Shabbat. You say the whole paragraph.
That's not a head sex from the Kehillat Yadayim.
Oh.
That's why the Germans, they wash. Before the Kiddush, they do Kiddush.
Right. The Germans though they're even doing more than that. They're drinking their wine and then doing their hamotzi.
Yes.
That's here. There's no wine. You're making your kiddush on the bread. You're just substituting borei peri hagefen with hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So I saw in the Chabad Siddur they have it. My assumption is that probably they were very poor, and they were used to making kiddush on bread because they didn't have wine or they didn't have some kind of thing that they can make it. I don't know why, but I can imagine it's the only reason why that bracha definitely exists in that Siddur. So if you're making kiddush on bread, so now is this the law of kiddush, in which you can make it for somebody else without tasting for it? From it? Or is this like the law of hamotzi, which is you can say it but you have to taste from it in order to fulfill someone else's obligation? By the way, which kiddush are you allowed to use bread for?
Lunch. Shabbat lunch.
Which kiddush do you use bread for?
Any.
Friday night. What about lunch? No. What about Motzei Shabbat Havdalah? No. The only time you can make kiddush on bread is Friday night. So, now it says here, רשאי לברך המוציא כדי להוציא את החברו שאינו יודע לברך אפילו אם אינו אוכל עמו. Because this hamotzi blessing is now replacing kiddush, you could treat it as kiddush, and you can make the blessing for somebody else even if you're not eating with them. So it gets upgraded from its hamotzi status to kiddush status, and you're able to make the hamotzi without actually eating from the bread. Do you have to wash your hands or not? That's a wonderful question. I don't know. Don't ask me. I didn't see it in the How practical of a question is it in the first place? I'm not sure. Yes.
No, never mind.
It would seem that it's filling the roles of both Kiddush
And
and
Hamotzi.
So
And hamotzi.
If you don't eat.
But here he's not eating. These next two halachot are interesting halachot. They're interesting because Maran talks about them, but he doesn't quote them in the Shulchan Aruch. So these are things we find in the Beit Yosef, and they're added here as extras. I'm asking you not to jump on me for either of them. Listen to this. Let's hear the explanation, and then you'll decide what you do with it. Fine? Linhog kavod b'fursat hamutzi. The top of the bold words, on the top of 406. To show respect to the bread of hamutzi. What do you mean the bread of hamutzi, as opposed to
Any bread.
any bread? We're not talking about the idea of showing respect to bread. We're talking about the idea of showing respect to bread that the mitzvah was done with it. טוב שיאכל לפחות כזית מן הפת שבירך עליה ברכת המוציא ובצע ממנה. It's proper to eat at least a kazait. How much is a kazait? The size of an olive. What kind of olive?
Big olive.
The olives that you know, an olive. Not an ostrich egg, not a dinosaur egg, not just an olive, like that. With a pit, without a pit, go break your own head. So you have to eat at least a kazait of bread from the bread which you made hamotzi on. Kodem sheyochal mipat acheret, before you eat from a different bread. So let's say you're making hamotzi on pitot, and somebody comes along with this fancy whole wheat chalav sorts with all kinds of sesame seeds. What you want this chalav? You made hamotzi on your pita. Before you taste from the second bread, have a kazait of the bread you made hamotzi on.
You can't transfer the bracha from one loaf to the other.
Right. Is it non-transferable? No refunds?
Tov sheyachal, which means you can.
Right. We're going to talk about it in just a second.
Okay.
Oren's right. It doesn't say you can't. You shouldn't. ויש אומרים שיאכל ממנה מעט בתחילת אכילתו ומעט בסוף אכילתו. Some say you should eat from this bread that you made hamotzi a little bit in the beginning of the meal and a little bit at the end of the meal. Two cryptic teachings. Let's read the footnotes on page 406 in the Rashi script. You know, my mom mentions about the Rashi script, and I once gave a shiur here about this. I don't remember to which group of people. I think I gave it to a shiur of the Monday morning class. Rashi script is not Rashi script at all. It's called Rashi script. The reason it's called Rashi script, you're printing a chumash. And you want to make sure that people can tell the difference between the chumash and the commentary on the chumash. So how do you do it before you have like fancy printing presses? You use a different font. You have the font of the chumash and the font of Rashi. So Rashi's script is called that precisely because it was used to print Rashi's commentary on the chumash. Did Rashi use it or not? I have no idea. I don't even know if Rashi used Rashi's script. Now, yeah.
I've heard that before. My question on that is always, Onkelos is always in normal letters.
In which books?
Everyone I've ever seen.
We're talking about old books.
Sure.
See, because they call it Rashi script, now they think it's some kind of mitzvah to print Rashi in Rashi script. We don't want to offend Rashi by not using his script.
Yeah, even so many books you showed us that had nothing to do with Rashi, and they would just print his script,
right.
like they to call it.
So
call
Rashi's
it off.
script is actually
Set it
called
off.
in Sephardic Hebrew a Chatzik Kulmos. It has a other name, a Solitero, something like that. You have in every Jewish community what you would call it a block script, which is the printed script that you see. You have the Torah script. What's that called?
Velush.
But that's a type of font. What's the actual name of the writing of the Torah? Ktav Ashurit, which means Assyrian writing.
The old.
Because Ezra changed
When
it.
Chachamim call Ivrit, it's not this. Ezra changed the font of the Torah. I gave a class about this Monday morning. I would just love to see the face. Ezra changed the font of the Torah, which means that according to that, there's three ways to learn that Gemara, by the way. According to that, all of the stories you know of, the Ten Commandments being a miracle, and the Mem Sofit being suspended in mid-air, the little middle of the Mem was, because it was engraved through and through on the tablets, and the little piece of the Mem didn't fall down. That's only if you believe that Moshe Rabbeinu gave a Torah using an Assyrian script that was changed to the Torah much later.
What did the Hebrew Mem Sofit look like?
There's no Mem Sofit like that.
Oh, we don't have
It wasn't that.
It wasn't
In
different.
fact, I posted once in our class, maybe not this classroom, the other classroom, the evolution of the Hebrew script. And if Ezra Sofer used a different script to write the Sefer Torah, then what about the whole thing of you can't change the Sefer Torah, and you can't change things in the Jewish faith, and you can't... And why did nobody ever tell me this when I was in Jewish school? Not in elementary school, not in high school, not in upper high... Never. It changes a certain narrative that you've been taught, or we've all been taught. It's important before someone else catches you off guard to research this topic and have a conversation about it. It's not for right now. So this handwriting, Chatzi Kulmus, is the writing of the Sephardic Jewish community. It has variants, so different groups of Sephardim wrote it slightly differently. Actually, was a great little mini clip that was made by an Israeli radio station about this.
Yes,
And this script was used predominantly in Sephardic communities as the script in a more fluent way. Now, as the Sephardic Jews begin to speak Arabic or move to Arabic-speaking countries, that handwriting becomes very fluid, like an Arabic hand, and sometimes it's not very easy to pick up the letters like you're seeing in front of you right now. It's a very clear Chatzi Kulmus. It kind of meshes together, and it looks, sometimes you look at a manuscript, well, that looks like Arabic. It's not Arabic, it's Sephardic handwriting influenced, kind of the way that when Americans write Hebrew, they're influenced by their English handwriting. Nothing you can do about it. The direction in which they write letters, the way of the stroke. Israelis write their letters, the Hebrew letters, different than the way Americans write the Hebrew letters. Not because because that's just the way that Americans do it. It's the handwriting that came in. Ashkenazim had a different handwriting, and that was the handwriting. They have a name for it in Hebrew that I'm forgetting right now, but it's the Ktav Ivri that you see, like what they teach in day schools and what they write in Israel. There's the block letters, the cursive letters. That's an entirely Ashkenazi handwriting. There are very few Jews left in the world who still write a Sephardic handwriting. Around the 1920s, this was forced on the Israeli Jewish community. I mean, it was the push. Everybody should write an Ashkenazi cursive script. You know, there's some interesting things that happened with a new revival. I don't really believe it's a revival, but the revival of the Hebrew language back in the day, you know, with Eliezer ben Yehuda and his friends. There's a few things that happen in Hebrew for those who are with this inclination to think about such things. So you have the Hebrew that's spoken is predominantly spoken with a Sephardic accent. Don't get stuck. Not entirely Sephardic accent. And the chet and the ayin and all the letters and perhaps some of the other accents are not all there. But compared to an Ashkenazi Hebrew, the Israeli Hebrew is pretty Sephardic. And even though many of these revivers of the modern Hebrew language were Ashkenazi, they chose the Sephardic version of Hebrew as their main Hebrew. Now, so in the early years of the State of Israel, according to the law, you had to speak with a chet and an ayin. You couldn't skip that. The official radio shows would all speak like that. That was part of the national language that very quickly fell by the wayside. The vowels mostly are Sephardic, but they have what they call, they have another little clip they put in about this. They call it Nikmat HaYiddish, the revenge of the Yiddish. Yiddish came back to bite the modern Israeli language.
Yes.
And that means there are certain words in Hebrew that are pronounced incorrectly in Sephardic Hebrew. And Israelis drive me crazy when they pray with Israeli Hebrew, meaning not just the pronunciation, but there's a word for this in English, the intonation, perhaps accentuation, could be a word. You know, you have in Hebrew, min,
And
el, and milra. You know what mil, el, and milra?
Oh, please.
You can say the word, hey, David, or you can say, David, right? You can say, my name is Yonatan Halevy, or Yonatan Halevy. Yeah? What's the national anthem of the State of Israel?
Hatikva.
Hatikva. Yet when they announce the national anthem of the State of Israel in the Yom HaAtzmaut ceremony on Mount Herzl, what do they call it? Hatikva. Well, now stand up for Hatikva. And then they sing Hatikva. So are they singing Hatikva? Or are they singing Hatikva? Now in Sephardic Hebrew, you would say Hatikva. But in Ashkenazi Hebrew, you say Hatikva. Yeah? And therefore the Yiddish speakers in Israel came back to take their revenge on the modern Israeli language. And that's why, you know, like certain words and certain names in Israel, when you want to speak to someone, you know, when the teacher calls you out, Mr. Halevy, what happened? Yeah? So in Israel, the Israeli version would be, if your teacher is upset at you, Yonatan, what happened? Who did it, yeah? But Yonatan, that would be a friendly way. People that you're close to, you would call them David, Avraham, whatever, Yosef. But when you want to be formal, like very formal, David, Avraham, Yosef, it's almost like the Sephardic pronunciation of Hebrew is used to be offensive. And that's what they call the revenge of Yiddish. Because the Yiddish still got its piece of the Israeli language. And really it's a mistake. My name is not Yonatan. My name is Yonatan. Then there are also some other words like, they made a mistake. The professor was wrong, but his kapara is a different it's a different conversation. Nonetheless, this revenge of Yiddish came back also when it came to the handwriting. Okay, you wanted to take the Sephardic accent, that's fine, but we're going to win the handwriting. And essentially that's what happened. There are a few times, Rabbi Yonatan Halevy recently wrote me a letter, and all in Sephardic handwriting. And Baruch Hashem, he wrote clearly, so I could read it. But I felt embarrassed that when I write back, I can't respond in that handwriting. Almost like Rashi script, like a handwritten Rashi script. Yes? So now with that brief history lesson, let's read the footnote.
That's hilarious. Put emphasis on the different syllables.
So look at Kuf Nun Chet. It's the second wide line on the left side commentary. So it's the bottom of the page. You see where the lines get wide? It's in parentheses. There's a bold parentheses. Ayen beBet Yosef. Look in the Bet Yosef. Who wrote Bet Yosef?
Maran.
Maran. Shevi b'shem HaShibolei HaLeket. He brings the name of the Shibolei HaLeket. V'ha'igo. B'shem Harav Rabbeinu Avigdor. Who is Rabbeinu Avigdor? Meaning what by his title? Harav Rabbeinu. What does it tell you? He's from the Rishonim. We mentioned in our first class. B'shem Harav Rabbeinu Simcha. The name of Rabbeinu Simcha. שצריך לאכול הפת שבצע המוציא קודם שיאכל פת אחר כדי שאוכלנה בתיאבון. He says you have to eat from the bread of hamotzi before you taste from another bread, because you want to eat the hamotzi bread with an appetite. And if you fill yourself up in that nice bread and then you go back to eat your pita, you're not going to like it as much. The Bet Yosef writes, שאינו יודע טעם. He doesn't know any reason for that. Who cares? Made a hamotzi, whatever bread you want. He doesn't understand the reason. ושאולי הוא משום חיבוב מצווה. And he says maybe the reason for this is because to show חיבוב מצווה. חיבוב mitzvah is an important concept that in today's world we shy away from, unfortunately. We once had a rabbi come to our community, not really, to a community I was once a part of, and tell us that so upset. How dare you let the Sefer Torah pass through the women's section? The woman should kiss the Sefer Torah! I was screaming. And I told him, listen, you can say whatever you want, do whatever you want in your community, but our community is what we do. Yeah, go call your rabbi in Yerushalayim. See what he would say about your crazy customs over here. I said, sure, I'm not afraid. I'll call it up there. I called it up there. He said, yeah. I said, no. He said, it's a problem. I said, well, why is it a problem? He said, Rabbi Yonatan, it's a mitzvah for the Sefer Torah to go through the ladies section. Ladies also have a mitzvah of chibuv mitzvah, to love the Torah, to show affection to the Torah. How could a human being be inside of a room that a Sefer Torah comes out of and they don't kiss Sefer Torah? What kind of Jewish person doesn't kiss Sefer Torah? You see people? There's a certain kind of handshake. They call it the Lithuanian handshake. It's it's the dead fish handshake. It's like you feel like it. Why are you shaking? Please stay away.
Where does that come
They're
from?
the same people who have that handshake are the same people who do this to the Sefer Torah.
Yes.
What are you so afraid to kiss Sefer Torah? You have to use take your hand out of Sefer Torah, go over, give Sefer Torah a kiss, give it a hug, be happy to Sefer Torah. What are you afraid of Sefer Torah for? Then there's the people who wait for the Sefer Torah to come to them. So I'm going to stand in my chair. Sefer Torah, you waiting? Sefer Torah, you should go to it. There's no reason the Sefer Torah should have to walk all around the room. We walk the Sefer Torah around the room so everybody gets a chance to kiss Sefer Torah. Why do you wait for Sefer Torah to come to you? If it was somebody important, you would go greet them. And then what happens when they kiss Sefer Torah? And then they're done. And they stay and talk to their friend until they do Hagbah, right? When the Sefer Torah comes out and you kiss Sefer Torah, what's the next step after you kiss Sefer Torah?
Full right.
You're supposed to follow the Sefer Torah till it gets to its final destination. That's your mitzvah. So, he said, of course you have to bring Sefer Torah to the ladies section. It's not even a question. He said, what's the guy's problem? I said, he said, it's not right. The guy goes to the ladies section, maybe he's looking at the ladies. But tell the guy to look at the Sefer Torah, what are you looking at the ladies for? And then they said, so what's the guy's problem? I said, I'm a little embarrassed to tell you what he said in public. He said, what did he say? In public, he told the people, he said, yeah, you rabbi, let's get the Torah. Now you see all these ladies, the ladies start kissing the guy who told them Sefer Torah. I said, are you a crazy person? Who kisses the guy who's carrying the Sefer Torah? He said, so tell the guy to make sure he doesn't get kissed. I was like, what? The whole story here is so far-fetched of why you shouldn't take a Sefer Torah to the ladies section. Chibuv mitzvah. When you take your tefillin out of its box, what do? You kiss it. When you take your talit out of it, you kiss the tzitziot. What are you afraid of kissing? What's so bad about kissing? You take 3 steps back from the Amidah. You see how people, they bow? See them? They're going to get neck problems. Baruch Hashem, we have Gershom Steiner. They can adjust your neck for you. But what about bowing to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Bow to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I was at Peretz and he saw someone bowing and he helped him. He helped him bow. He said, that's good. Now get up. A person has to know to have chibuv mitzvah. You see something that's kiss it. In Israel there was a politician recently who made fun of those traditional Jews who claim to be so educated, but he called them the menashkei ha-mezuzot, the mezuzah kissers. Hear the truth? There is a reason not to kiss mezuzot, because probably half the mezuzot that are in people's houses are not kosher. They got it at some photocopied Judaica store somewhere. Ask Dan. He'll tell you all the mezuzot he's seen in his life.
I collect
that
the
people,
whole bag of them.
that people bring to him. And say, how much did you pay for that? Someone here once came to our community with tefillin he bought. For $450 on Amazon. Someone should tell, don't buy tefillin on Amazon. This should be your first,
To buy from the
not on eBay, not AliExpress. Don't buy tefillin. Don't buy tefillin. Buy tefillin from a reputable person who you could also go to after saying, you sold me, it was Dr. Seuss wrapped inside of the... You have to have a person, an address you go to. You have to have such a thing. They bring tefillin. You open up inside. There's nothing inside tefillin.
Shame.
Oh, wow.
There's nothing there. $450 for $500, you could have got yourself a kasher pair of tefillin somewhere. So you thought you were going to save $50, but you didn't even get tefillin. You got someone's leather jacket in China made into tefillin. You take tefillin out, you kiss tefillin to show chibuv mitzvah. So says the Maran, maybe the reason why we eat from that challah is to show chibuv mitzvah. It's an important thing. People today not a lot of chibuv mitzvah. The Gemara says, the Gemara has many teachings. Hani bavli tipshai. Stupid Babylonians. By the way, I don't mean to offend any Iraqi Jews here. This was a teaching of the HaShamayim in Israel towards the Iraqis there. And
he married well.
You guys set this up. No warnings were given.
And he said, the Gemara said, look at these, but they have a lot of quotes like that. One of them says, look at these people that they kiss a dead Sefer Torah, but they don't kiss a living Sefer Torah. They kiss the Sefer that comes out of the ark. What about the Sefer Torah? Real Talmidei Chachamim. I didn't say rabbis. Real Talmidei Chachamim. You see a real Talmidei Chacham kiss his hand. But I'm not quoting this to halacha. Halacha Peltz, if you know I quoted it, would kill me. The Ben Ish Chai writes in Od Yosef Chai. He says that if a woman comes to kiss the Talmidei Chacham's hand, and the Talmidei Chacham doesn't want the lady to kiss his hand, he doesn't have the right to pull away his hand. Because she is coming to do a mitzvah of chibuv mitzvah. And who is he to take away her mitzvah? Now, in today's generation, in general, I don't recommend such things at all, in any way.
Yeah.
But in mitzvah din, we don't agree also. We don't agree in halakha that a woman should be kissing men's hands. But a woman sees Talmidei Chacham, she should kiss her hand too. I mean, Hag in every Jewish house was to go home on Friday night and to kiss your parents' hand. How important of a mitzvah? They say about the Chidah that he would walk 2 hours to do this mitzvah on Friday night. Before he would do his own kiddush. That's how important of a mitzvah it is. Now, really, for the Mekubalim in the room, they say that to kiss the mother's hand is api kabbalah. So why do you kiss the father's hand?
Not to get him upset.
I was gonna say, don't
Mishum kibud av. To respect him so he's not jealous of his wife.
Just calm it down.
Yeah, but it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. It's a thing to teach your children. But it looks weird. Hey, a lot of things people do look weird. But this is a mitzvah. Chibur mitzvah. So Maran says maybe that's the reason why we eat from that bread. V'Rama b'Haga hevi din zeh. Rama in his notes brought this halakha. V'shul mishum chibur mitzvah. Rama says yes. The reason is because of chibur mitzvah. I mean, the Rama says it's not maybe. That's the reason. V'chen da'at Rabbeinu Ha'ari b'Shaar mitzvot. The Arizal agrees with this. V'uva b'Kav HaChaim. Kav HaChaim quotes this. V'chen ketvu HaMa'arikash v'Agot Ma'ara Azulai and Anavush and other rabbis brought this as well, that the reason why you eat from the bread of Hamotzi first is because you want to eat it with an appetite and not to eat it after you've eaten something else, to show chibuv mitzvah. You want to show that it's this mitzvah is important to you. Now the second halakha here is you should eat a little bit of the bread at the beginning of the meal, a little bit of the bread at the end of the meal. Ayin bashla. Who's the shla? Shaar Kadosh, that's the Sefer Brit. HaShamayim is also Horowitz, you're right. Rabbi Levi Horowitz, yes?
Yeah.
He wrote the Sefer Shaar Kadosh, the book of Kabbalah, and all kinds of things mixed there. The Shaar Kadosh is responsible for...
Sephardic halakha being dominant in Israel.
Right. He's an Ashkenazi rabbi who makes Aliyah to Israel. And because he's such a Mekubal, he's really into Sephardic minhagim. And he's the reason why, if you ever wondered why Ashkenazim do different things in Israel than they do in America, I'll show you something interesting. Someone just donated the Siddur. This is an Israeli Siddur. It's like an old school, used to use this a lot in the old, like, Bnei Akiva communities. This was Siddur Rinat Israel, the Ashkenaz, Levnei Chutz La'aretz. Siddur for Jews who live outside of Israel. What does that mean, Jews live outside of Israel?
It's all different texts.
There's no second to Yom Tov.
It's
There it is. Oh, I
it's
thought
no,
it
but it's
was
all
Rachel.
in Siddur, it's not a Machzor.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Living
is-
outside the land of Israel.
This Siddur was taking into consideration the fact that the Ashkenazi Jewish community does things fundamentally differently in Israel than they do outside of Israel. So if you would come with your art scroll Siddur to a regular Ashkenazi minyan in Israel, you would lose yourself in some places. For example, in Ashkenazi minyanim in Israel, nothing but Hasidim, they do Birkat Kohanim every day. Right?
But not
Like
here.
we do. In Ashkenazi minyanim in Israel, they say Enkelohenu in the Pitum HaKtoret every day, like the Sfaradim, and not like the Ashkenazim. In Israel, the nosach of announcing the new month follows the Israeli version. It's much longer. It's like hours, and not the very short. The Ashkenazi one has like 3 words in it, and it's over. At the end of the tefillah, the Ashkenazim in Israel say Baruch Hashem V'Ach, like the Sfaradim do, but in America they don't. Now, obviously, by the Hasidim, this is all different. The Hasidim adopted already these Israeli customs also outside of Israel. But all of this comes from the Shaar Kadosh, who came and said that the Sephardim, their Siddur is more Kabbalistically inclined, and therefore he forced these customs onto the Ashkenazi Jews that were under his rule when he was the rabbi of the Ashkenazi community in Yerushalayim. And that's why there are 2 Siddurim for Ashkenazim, those in Israel and those outside of Israel. There are other things. For example, in Israel, at a Brit Milah, Ashkenazim say when the baby cries, Shechianu. Like Sfaradim, we also make Shechianu by the Brit Milah. Outside of Israel, the Ashkenazim don't say Shechianu by Brit Milah. I think even the Hasidim don't say Shechianu by Brit Milah. The Rama says Mishum Tsar Di'enuka, because the baby is suffering. There's a Gaon of Vilna. So in Israel, the baby doesn't suffer. The baby doesn't cry in Israel. It's interesting. Rav Kook writes that in Eretz Israel, sometimes suffering, you can still make a shechianu for that suffering. That certain things happen that are hard and they're bad. It's tragic when Jewish lives are lost, but there's a difference between Jewish lives getting lost in an Inquisition or a pogrom, and Jewish lives getting lost to build the Jewish presence in Eretz Israel. Someone gave their life for something that is, everyone gave their life for something. You're able to recognize the greatness of that loss. This directly led to having a kota. This directly led to having whatever you can see the line clearly. And sometimes things that happen in Israel are not so bad, even if they're bad. That was Rav Kook's philosophical idea. Why in halakha makes a difference? Again, because in Israel, the Sfaradim were leading, the Ashkenazim were following the Sephardic minhagim here. So the Shulchan Aruch right. Shevi b'shem Sefer Chasidim. He quotes a book, Sefer Chasidim. Who was Sefer Chasidim? Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. Remember in Jerusalem there used to be a synagogue that had an arch. It was called the Churva synagogue, the destroyed synagogue. So today they rebuilt it, and they still call it the destroyed synagogue. But it was the destroyed synagogue of Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. I believe that was one of the biggest Ashkenazi aliyahs to the land of Israel before the modern state of Israel. How many Jews came?
250,000?
No, 800 something.
I believe the number was about 70 people.
70
What?
people?
It was a big-
Before the modern founding of the state of Israel, that was the largest
Oh, yeah.
aliyah of Ashkenazim ever to come to Israel. Yeah. You know, when it comes to studying history, and to realize why Zionism was such a big deal in Ashkenaz and not in Sfarad, you have to also take into consideration what it meant in Ashkenaz to make aliyah, and theological, and philosophical, what the Jews there felt about aliyah compared to other places. Kapach writes, and in Yemen, people were always making aliyah. Whoever could left. Always. It was always a movement, constant movement to Eretz Yisrael. Other places, when a person went to Eretz Yisrael, it was like, oh, I need a trophy to go to Eretz Yisrael. Because of that, it created a certain opposition to a movement of people going to Eretz Yisrael. Famous, the Baal Shem Tov pushed people to go to Eretz Yisrael. And there are many, that's why if you go to Tveria, you'll find many Hasidic rabbis buried there. Why Tveria and not Yerushalayim?
They couldn't live
I'm stuck on history today. Why Tveria and not Yerushalayim?
because they couldn't live in Yerushalayim.
The Jews were in Yerushalayim. Why did all the rabbis go to Tveria?
Maybe that's where Donna Gracia's.
There you go. See, you have a good rabbi.
What was the answer?
In the Knesset, they have a picture of Theodor Herzl. And they call him Jose HaMedina, the visionary of the state of Israel. If you ever read Theodor Herzl's book, The Jewish State, he didn't envision anything that exists in Israel today. Some of the corruption, yes. Some of the other things, yes. But everything else, Theodor Herzl writes, by the way, what he did for the political Zionist movement is tremendous. You can't take away from him. But he mentions how, who would think of speaking Hebrew in a Jewish country? Which Jews speak Hebrew? Which speak German? And why would you take Shabbat off? Which kind of good socialist country would not work 7 days a week? His flag for the state of Israel is a white flag with 7 golden stars representing the 7 work days of gold. Many wonderful ideas. I aside from his picture in the Knesset, I don't know what he contributed to the modern state of Israel in terms of vision.
If it
But-
would have been up to him, it would have been Uganda. So
It was the
thank
first
God.
plan.
And he
No,
was
like I
English.
said, Kvodo b'mkom munach. He was a person in a place that influenced people in a society that other Jews couldn't reach. He managed to push people to think about the idea of going to Israel. I'm not taking away from him what he did contribute. But Theodor Herzl was not the Jose HaMedina in my opinion. In my opinion, the opinion of, I spoke to a few people who are Chachamim, scholars of history, there was a Jose HaMedina. There was a female, a woman, who was the visionary of the modern state of Israel. Her name was Donna Gracia.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know who she was?
Donna Gracia Nasi.
She was one of the most important women in Jewish history. Know her, and know her well. Read about her, learn about her, go online and read about her. She's a person that should be a household name in every Jewish community. It's not. Donna Gracia, if I could give you her life story in the few minutes that I have left, and then how it's going to do with Challah and Shabbat, I don't know. But Donna Gracia, remind me that it has to do with Tveria.
Yes, I'm sure.
Donna Gracia was the wife of the most wealthy Jew in Europe at the time. A Spanish family. And they were the bankers. They owned all the banks. It's a true thing. It might be an anti-Semitic stereotype,
used
but
to be.
here it was true. And when the Inquisition broke out, she was forced to convert from the Anusim. They were forced to convert. Please don't use the word Moranos. These are Jews, if you want to call them crypto Jews, Anusim, but that's who they were. And they lived underground. She had a sister who actually did convert. And when Donna Gracia's husband passed away, she became the wealthiest woman in all of Europe. And she owned the banks, and she owned all of these institutions. Her sister ratted her out to the Spanish Inquisition. She thought she might get the money. And in a terrible turn of events, Donna Gracia gets put into prison. Under whose rule?
Fernando.
the Spanish rule. Now you should know Dona Gracia, until then, her family, her and her husband, were the patrons of some of the greatest Torah institutions in the world. And they were known. Dona Gracia gave not a little bit of money, gave a lot of money. Enough money that with her donation, you didn't have to fundraise from everybody else. She was a big supporter of Torah. She would come to places, this place doesn't have a yeshiva, we're building a yeshiva. Doesn't have a bedin, we're building a bedin. Doesn't have a mikveh, we're building a mikveh. She was a doer. The Inquisition broke out and all that changed, went underground. She finds herself in a Spanish Inquisition prison because of her sister. And there she befriends a doctor who had connections, long story, connections with the Turkish government. The Turks were at war with Spain. And the moment that this doctor found out that Dona Gracia was in a Spanish prison, he went to the Sultan in Turkey and said, listen, there's a really rich Jewish lady who's in prison in Spain, and I'm sure it would benefit you greatly to help her out. And the Sultan of Turkey grants Dona Gracia retroactive Turkish citizenship and reaches out to the Spanish Inquisition and says, you have one of my citizens in your custody, and if you would like to go to war with me, you're more than welcome to. But I suggest you release her. And she comes to Turkey. They say the first day that she came to Turkey, she gave out probably the equivalent in today's currency of $1 million to charity to poor people in the streets. She just wanted people to know she's here, she's back, and she's going to take over like she did in the olden days. And she begins to invest in her plan, not just to support Jewish institutions outside of Israel, but she believes that the only hope for the Jewish people to save themselves from the Spanish Inquisition is to build an autonomous Jewish state in the land of Israel. Never told me that in my Hebrew Israeli history class. Dona Gracia goes to the Sultan and asks to purchase Israel from him. It's under the Ottoman Empire. You can buy a nice chunk of Israel. He says you can have everything except for Jerusalem. Jerusalem is mine. That's a claim to fame, Jerusalem. And so he sold her the city of Tveria. Tveria, which is crucial because it's a place where you can build. It's a place which is open. It's a place that has water. It's a place that can be used for agriculture. And Dona Gracia invests in Tveria and buys the city of Tveria and institutes in Tveria a Jewish mayor. From which family? Chacham Abulafia becomes the mayor of Tveria. The same Chacham Abulafia who was friends with the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Rabbi Chaim Ibn Attar from Morocco. If you may remember, Rabbi Chaim Ibn Attar comes to Israel. Yes? To come to Tveria, and it never happened. They don't end up meeting each other. They always say that they would meet, the Mashiach would have come. But there's a reason. Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar believed that we should be going to Jerusalem, not taking over Tveria. And that's why he heads out to Jerusalem, and he begins his own little settlement of sorts in Jerusalem. And Rav Chaim Abulafia stays in Tveria. You should know there's a famous Palestinian historian. I'm using that name. And he records all this story of Rav Chaim Abulafia. I mean, it would help us to know this history. That we used to have ownership of Tveria even in those days. And there was a functional Jewish government in Tveria for decades and decades and decades. The spoken language was Hebrew. We didn't wait for Ben Yehuda to show up to speak Hebrew. In Yerushalayim, when the Shulchan Aruch became the rabbi in Yerushalayim, he writes that he cannot explain to you the joy of standing in front of a pulpit in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh as the chief rabbi, speaking in Hebrew. He said not just in Hebrew, but speaking in a Sephardic Hebrew.
Wow.
Because that was the spoken language of the Jews in Eretz Israel. In fact, when the British were there and when the Turks were there before, the consulate had a service department for Jews in Hebrew. Not in Arabic, not in English, in Hebrew. Whoever told you the Jews didn't speak Hebrew until people came around and revived the language is also lying to you. Baruch Hashem, Dona Gracia's donations kept yeshivot running into the 19th century. There are entire yeshivot and kolim that were funded from the Spanish Inquisition until 100 years ago. And she envisioned Jewish autonomy in the land of Israel and began buying land. That idea later passed on to Rabbi Yehuda Bivas, Rabbi Yehuda Al-Kilai. They had Ashkenazi counterparts, Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch, Kalisher. Yes?
On the Fiore.
They invested in this plan, And then along comes a man named Theodor Herzl, who, of course, you know his history, was a secular Jew who came from an assimilated family, and he discovered that Jews were facing anti-Semitism, and at first he wanted Jews to convert to Christianity, didn't tell you that either. Then he wanted Jews to move to Uganda, and then when he realized nobody was going to go on those plans, he worked on going to Israel. Theodor Herzl had a grandfather who was a very religious man, was not an assimilated Jew, was a Sephardic man in Greece, who used to go to the synagogue of none other than Rabbi Yehuda Bilas, who was the modern founder of Sephardic religious political Zionism. Theodor Herzl didn't get these ideas out of nowhere. But there's an agenda from two camps. There's an agenda from a secular Eastern European Zionist perspective that religious Jews and Sephardic Jews, two different camps but sometimes the same, had nothing to do with the founding of the State of Israel. The religious Jews were good for nothings who just prayed all day and didn't actually do anything about coming to Israel. And the Sephardic Jews are the illiterate buffoons who never had anything to contribute to Israel. And then you have the ultra-Orthodox revisionist historians of today. Historians is an interesting term to use for that. There was a socialist historian who once said, the hardest part of being a socialist historian is predicting the past. It's a difficult job to do. Yes? And they have an agenda that you should never be able to show that religious people were involved in anything to do with the State of Israel because they're anti the State of Israel. Because of this, the religious contributions to the founding of the State of Israel, as well as the Sephardic contributions to the founding of the State of Israel, have not just been destroyed, but destroyed completely. And a lot of what we could use to show what actually Eretz Yisrael was about, we don't even know. The history is gone. And it's our job to learn it. It's documented, well documented in books. We just have to dig back a layer. The Shaar Kadosh, I have to end with him before we run away. Shaar Kadosh says, the reason for this is to eat hamotzi at the end, so there's a taste of the hamotzi blessing still in your mouth. If you can remember, that reminds you of another halakha.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing.
Like the Afikoman, right?
Yeah.
A similar idea. The Kaf HaChaim mentions that Arizal would disagree. That Arizal believed you should eat the whole loaf of hamotzi at the beginning of the day. You should finish the whole thing.
You mean everybody?
They must
not
have
one
pretty
person.
small loaves.
They were using pitot. So you finish your pitot at the beginning of the meal. You see this
Now,
halal
what are
they
these?
bring to weddings, you know. It would take, even Og Melech Habashan would have a hard time eating that whole challah on his own. But so there's a difference, and this is not a halakha, again, this is an idea. We're not here tomorrow night. Monday night is on the Shem, and we're going to end off this chapter. This chapter is controversial. The controversy starts now. He mentions here an idea that when you make a hamotzi, you shouldn't give the bread not to an animal, not to a bird, not to a domesticated animal or a wild animal, and not to a person who's not Jewish.
Yes.
By the way, all included in the same category. It's important for us to examine the footnotes here, because you'll see very quickly what Maran's real feeling is about this halakha, or halakha, if I might say. And if you remember my shiur on soul snatchers, that this whole idea that goyim don't have souls, or they're not, this idea we reject categorically. And it's important to understand, so what are we trying to do here? That's going to be the beginning of Monday night shiur. Everyone, thank you so much.